Hi, I'm Christopher Hine, and today we're going to talk about the difference between Jujutsu and Aikido. So Jujutsu and Aikido have a very entangled past. So Aikido comes from Jujutsu. Morihei Ueshiba studied Jujutsu, and the ideas of Aikido came from that. But Aikido became a different martial art than Jujutsu. And so today we're going to take Josh and Maya, and we're going to have them do a myriad of different practices, live practices, so you guys can see what the difference between those two are. So in Aikido, you have a goal that is simply to not be dominated. That's the only goal of Aikido. I don't want to throw anyone else or hurt anyone else or do anything to anyone else. Whereas in Jiu-Jitsu, you have a very clear goal of I do want to dominate someone else, right? So I'm in contention with someone else, and the way I'm going to stop that contention is to physically dominate them. Both have their place, so one's not better than the other, but they're two totally different kinds of studies. If you are not very skilled and not very physical, then Aikido would probably be a better way to go because you're not going to physically dominate someone who's greater than you. However, if you have a chance, then maybe Jiu-Jitsu is the way to handle it, right? So there's different ways that you want to approach situations at different times, and so there's different martial arts for that. So a lot of times I think when Jiu-Jitsu people look at Aikido, they think Aikido is trying to achieve the same goals as Jiu-Jitsu does, and so it's confusing to look at. And I think a lot of times Aikido people see Jiu-Jitsu and they kind of want to do Jiu-Jitsu, and so then that gets all mixed up. So we need to have a clear way to look at the difference. And so at least with my approach to Aikido, I'm going to show the difference between those two. So we're going to have Josh and Maya do a modern style Jiu-Jitsu grappling that's going to be on the ground. Then we're going to have them do some armed grappling that would be a little more like traditional Jiu-Jitsu. And then we're going to have them move into Aikido. And you'll be able to see in a live context how each one of those is different. I'm going to call Josh and Maya out here. We're going to do the work for you guys.
Okay, so this is a classic modern style Jiu-Jitsu. There's no weapon, they're just grappling. If you're looking at this, you can see some pretty typical stuff you would see in most Jiu-Jitsu schools you would go look at right now. There is a high emphasis on head control, leg control, and core control. So you can see they're really working each other's legs. Maya's trying to work his legs to pass. Josh trying to hold her in. There's a little bit of wrist control going on there, but not too much. Much more elbow control and then core control. So Maya's trying to hold him. Josh uses that to sweep. Again, we're seeing just body control is the main idea here, right? So Josh is trying to squish her down as much as he can. She's going to use that against him here in a second. So she's baiting him to go to one side, and then she's going to hook in. He put his leg in there, and which is exactly what she wanted to trap the arm, and she gets the sweep there. She's attained top position. She's trying to pass. We're going to go ahead and pause it right here. Okay, so you see basic stuff you see there in classic Jiu-Jitsu, which is because there's no weapon involved, you can choose to go either right or left. You're free to go either right or the left. Wrist control is not of great importance because the arms aren't actually doing all that much. They can generally be taken care of by pushing an elbow off or ducking around the arm. So most of what the arms are doing can be nullified much more easy than wrist control. So most of the emphasis is going towards legs, clearing the legs, trying to pass those legs, and core control and head control. So there was tons of that in there, and that's what you would see in modern Jiu-Jitsu is lots of those things because there's no weapon to be involved, right? So the arms are really not of that great importance. Okay, so now we're going to see a hybridizing between the two, which is you're going to see a ground-only game, which is more what modern Jiu-Jitsu goes towards now is ground grappling. Ground grappling is much more important in modern Jiu-Jitsu than it was in traditional Jiu-Jitsu. So we're going to see that, but at the same time, we're going to introduce a weapon, and so Maya has a weapon tucked into her pants in the front there, and she's been instructed to only draw the knife when they go into the clinch. And then also the second they go into the clinch, Josh could draw the knife as well. So they're going to be grappling on the ground only over this weapon that's come into play. And so we're going to see, even though this is really pushed towards a lot of what modern Jiu-Jitsu is in the ground emphasis, the heavy ground emphasis, we're going to start to see a change towards what more traditional Jiu-Jitsu looks like. And we'll see some of the kinds of things you see in Aikido because of the weapons that's in play. So let's watch this now. Okay, so Maya is already trying to get to that knife. Josh knew, so he checked the hand. And we have classic katate dori here is what we would call this in Aikido. He drove her down, that opportunity. Josh is trying to crank it out of her hand. So he's trying to work. It's kind of a bad camera angle to see. He's still trying to clear those legs because they're on the ground. He's got to get over those legs. He had one hand in control of that weapon. He felt like he could, and he used that to pass. So he got a nice pass there. Okay, he's trying to get around. Maya's wrapping her legs right back around him. He's stacking her up a little bit there. But notice how heavy the emphasis is on wrist control. Heavy, 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 heavy wrist control. This is like you would see in Aikido, or more importantly, like you would see in traditional Jujutsu. So the wrist control stuff that we have in Aikido comes from traditional Jujutsu. So that's why there's all this wrist control, because there's a weapon in play. If they were to ignore those, then it'd be no good. Josh had to fall back there, tries to go into an arm bar, he's kicking her arm free. He's got the knife now, and he's going to work with that knife, and that's time for those guys. Okay, so there we can see a practice that is kind of in between the modern world of Jiu-Jitsu and the classic world of Jiu-Jitsu, because we're seeing the emphasis on heavy groundwork and some of the techniques you would see in modern Jiu-Jitsu for sure. And then at the same time, we're seeing some traditional techniques start to appear, right? So in that, if you saw, there was a Nikyo involved. There was several different little things came out, and lots of the classic holds that you see in Aikido, which is katate dori, gyakute dori, marote dori, ryote dori, all those wrist holds were constantly happening in that. And the reason is because there's a weapon in play. So that's why Aikido has that emphasis on wrist control, is because traditional Jiu-Jitsu also had an emphasis in wrist control for some of the stuff. Okay, so now we stood these guys up. So now we're getting a little more into what a true traditional Jiu-Jitsu practice would be. So the last one was kind of hybridizing between what you see in a lot of modern Jiu-Jitsu and what you see in traditional Jiu-Jitsu. This is going to be a lot more like traditional Jiu-Jitsu now. So they're standing up. Maya has the knife. The knife's already out, so the knife's already in play. She can draw it and use the knife as soon as she wants. But her emphasis is Jiu-Jitsu, right? So she wants to get Josh and stab Josh. That's her goal. So she's got the knife out, but she wants to get a hold of that guy, hold him down, and stab him as much as she can. And Josh, of course, would like to get the knife away from her and then do the same thing to her. If he gets the knife, he's going to hold her down and stab her. So this is Jiu-Jitsu, right? The idea is to dominate. So let's go ahead and push play on this. Okay, so Maya got a cut in there. Josh kind of blocked that out. Now he's put it up tight. Got a nice outside leg sweep. He's trying to move around to the outside. Maya's using her legs to kind of frame up. She's trying to get that weapon free, is mostly what she's trying to do in this position right now. And Josh managed to get it, right? So he did a quick Nikyo over there, switched over. Okay, now Josh doesn't want to get away. He wants to work her, right? So he's working around the outside and trying to stab her. She kind of tied him up in that. Once she got the weapon in hand, Josh went to a position trying to isolate and get that weapon free. So right now, Josh is just trying to get that weapon free. He's cranking around the top as much as he can. She's holding him. He's really trying to work that weapon hand out. So he's finding some way to frame. Maya's giving him a good time here. He's now isolated that knife off to the side there. He's going to try and work it out. So again, this is a lot like modern Jiu-Jitsu, a lot of ground stuff. Okay, Maya's trying to stand, and Josh is sticking right with her. Josh is going to fall back here in a second, so he's trying to fall to a rear naked. But notice he had to keep his hand on that knife. He couldn't just, I'm going to go ahead and pause it. He couldn't just go into that rear naked like you would in modern Jiu-Jitsu, because he had to keep the knife in check, right? So that's an important difference between learning to grapple armed and learning to grapple unarmed. If you learn to grapple unarmed, it's really confusing a lot of times when there's a weapon in play, because what you're trained to do, how you're trained to move, won't account for the weapon because you're not used to dealing with a weapon. And so there's a lot of sacrifices you have to make when you start grappling with a weapon. So, the beginning of that standard started out exactly like traditional Jiu-Jitsu, and then we went to the ground. And it's not that traditional Jiu-Jitsu didn't have ground emphasis, but the main emphasis was standing stuff. Okay, so now we're going to see Aikido scenario. So Maya again has the knife. Maya's told to treat Josh in an Aikido fashion. So now she's going to try to use Aikido to thwart Josh's attempt to use Jiu-Jitsu. So Josh is still using Jiu-Jitsu essentially, right? So and it's going to look much more like traditional Jiu-Jitsu now. And the reason for that being that, that's a small distinction sometimes, but the reason for that being he's going to be trying a lot of stand-up things because there's a weapon in play, and we'll see that here in a second. But Josh's goal is to dominate Maya. His goal is to take her down and to dominate her. Maya's job is to stay away from Josh, not do anything to him if she doesn't need to, but use the weapon, of course, if she needs to or has the opportunity to. But her main goal is just to stay away from Josh. Now we're going to see how this exchange between these two people plays out a little different. So Maya's at distance right now. She's going to try and keep that. We're going to play. Okay, he's trying to keep it, showing that knife, trying to keep him away. Josh goes in defensive position. Maya gets pushed around. Now, Josh is just driving her as hard as he can right now. So all he's trying to do is knock her down. That's it. And Maya's turning with it, blending with it, moving with it, staying. Josh now has a Marote Dori. Okay, so he's coming out. He tries to Sayonage. Doesn't work. Maya pulls him around. And Josh trying to leg sweep. Maya's stepping out of it. Maya's trying to clear right now. She can't. She uses a Nikyo there. She gets free. And again, she's trying to make distance. So she doesn't want to get Josh. She wants to stay away. She's framing out with Sankaku Sabaki. Josh pushed in hard. She got Kaiten Nage there. Josh is coming around. Maya's trying to frame out. Josh got her leg that time. Brings her down. They're on the ground. Maya's now using the knife to distract Josh. Josh used his hands to come up, so it means he let go of her. That gave Maya the opportunity to get up again. So now Maya's back up. Moving out to the outside. Josh is trying to stalk her. Josh is trying to put her in a corner. Maya's staying out of those corners as best she can. Maya's framing. Sankaku Sabaki. Again, not really a Kaitenage there, and that's the end of the tape.
All right, guys, so that is basic comparison at the school between the different systems. And looking at how Jiu-Jitsu and Aikido are just inherently different. The idea in Aikido is to always get away, whereas the idea in Jiu-Jitsu is to dominate. And that might not seem like a big deal. It might kind of seem like, well, why not just study Jiu-Jitsu and then use that to get away? The problem with that is you're training a mentality that constantly wants to put you back into a bad situation, right? So, if you're not the dominant factor and you can't dominate in a situation, the best thing for you to do is get out of that situation. And that's what Aikido always emphasizes, is making distance and getting out of that situation. Whereas Jiu-Jitsu is taking advantage of opportunities to attack. And while sometimes that might pay off for you, if the odds are stacked greatly against you, then it's probably not going to be the best idea for you to have. So there you can see kind of a good example of the same exact two people, both trained quite a lot in Aikido, with some training in Jiu-Jitsu, and you can kind of see how the differences between those two people doing different situations. They've both done a lot of armed grappling, so traditional Jiu-Jitsu quite a bit, and modern Jiu-Jitsu a fair amount, but not all that much, so they're not stellar modern Jiu-Jitsu practitioners. But you can see the idea of how those two interact with each other in a modern Jiu-Jitsu situation, how they interact with each other in a hybridized situation between modern Jiu-Jitsu and traditional Jiu-Jitsu, in a much more traditional Jiu-Jitsu sense, and then in an Aikido sense. And so you can kind of get an idea by looking at those 4 videos what the real difference is between Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu, and you can kind of get an idea of what the difference is between modern Jiu-Jitsu and traditional Jiu-Jitsu. So I'm Christopher Hine. Thanks a lot guys for watching. We'll see you next time.